welcome you all to this wonderful lecture. Today's speech is going to be given by Shri Dhruba Panda ji, who is looking much younger than his age because he was born in 1949 at Sambalpur. He graduated from the GM College at Sambalpur and did his MSc Maths from NIT Roorkela. He then joined the UCO Bank in 73, served there for 25 years as a branch manager and retired as Chief of Vigilance. His hobbies are very interesting. He loves to trek in the Himalayas. He also reads and writes. He has published 4 books, 3 on the Himalayas and 1 on the Upanishads. Also written 30 articles in various journals and magazines. He's been a member of the Theosophical Society for the last 18 years, out of which 10 of he has been a president of the Sambalpur Lodge. He's a patron and life member of the Divine Life Society. Today he is going to be talking to us about the NYAYA DARSHAN. So I did a little research. This is an ancient Indian philosophy of logic and epistemology. So for people like me who don't know anything about it, we hope to learn something new. And for those who already know something about it, they hope to get more clarity through this lecture. So yes, sir, welcome. Please start.
Thank you so much. Namaskar. Namaskar to all. Honorable Chair, Brother Pradeep Kumar Mahapatra, and sisters and brothers of Theosophical Society present in this webinar. I am thankful to Theosophical Society for giving me this opportunity to talk to you people. Actually, sometime in last August or September, I delivered a couple of lectures on Indian system of philosophy, wherein I gave an outline of different schools, their classifications into Nastika and Astika, Orthodox and Heterodox, each containing 6 schools of philosophy. Perhaps they were worth listening to or maybe interesting. In the month of December, Brother Pradeep Mahapatra asked me if I can deliver a series of lectures on the Astika Sardarshana, Astika philosophy. I agreed because it will give me an opportunity to recapitulate my study of the system containing Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, Yoga, Purva Mimamsa, and Uttara Mimamsa. These 6 philosophies form the Astika school of philosophy of Indian school of philosophy. I am neither a teacher of philosophy nor I can claim to be an authority in this subject. However, I would try to share with you precisely and concisely whatever I have learned by my study, reflection, and contemplation. Most of you are more learned than me. Therefore, I request you to kindly rectify me whenever I go wrong. With these words, let me first talk about what is philosophy and its content. Philosophy, which is translated as darshana, means love for knowledge of truth. Darshana word has been derived from its root, drik, meaning to view. It views the truth. It explains how to see truth or reality, and thus centered around knowledge, more particularly self-knowledge. 3 things of self-knowledge are, they are important. We must know it first. The knower, called Pramata, source of knowledge, pramana, object of knowledge, prameya. Epistemology is theory of knowledge which deals with source of knowledge, nature of knowledge, extent of knowledge, knower, knowable, and source of valid knowledge. The core of every philosophy consists of creation, that is world, creator, that is God, individual soul or spirit, suffering and liberation from suffering, and it recommends practices for attaining liberation. Each philosophy has a source book called Sutra. Actually, a sutra depicts very briefly the content of the philosophy. They are codified literature obeying certain rules. All these sutras, they are codified literature. It is difficult to understand them unless somebody goes through a guru to guide him. Each sutra consists of minimum letters, and it is called alpakshara characteristic. The characteristic of minimum letters, containing minimum letters, is called alpakshara. And these are statements, not shlokas or mantras. These statements contain essence of the subject, and it is called saravat. So it is called saravat. And these statements are without doubt as regards the meaning. It has clear meaning. That's why it is called asandigdha. Reflects all the aspects of the subject which it deals with. And it is called Vibato Mukha. Each sutra reflects some aspects of the subject clearly, with clear meaning, without any doubt, and it expresses the meaning with minimum letters. You must have heard about many sutras like Brahma Sutra, Yoga Sutra, Bhakti Sutra, Shiva Sutra, etc. So also NYAYA Sutra. And today we'll deal with NYAYA Sutra. The founder of the philosophy is the writer of the sutra and is known as Sutrakara. There are 6 means of proof. Because knowledge means valid knowledge. And to get valid knowledge, there are 6 means of proof, pramana. And they are classified in 2 sections. One is direct perception or pratyaksha. The others are indirect cognition or paroksha pramana. Under this indirect cognition, there are 5 means. There are 5 means. The one is comparison. The first is inference, anumana, conclusion based on previous observation. Second is comparison or analogy, that is upamana. Third is testimony or words, sabda, relying on past or present reliable text or experts. The fourth is postulation, presumption. It is called arthapatti, derivation from circumstances. And the fifth one is non-perception or non-existence, anupalabdhi or abhava. I will explain this in due course of time, but simply here I have enlisted, and it is common to all philosophy. Whatever I am telling now is common to all philosophy, not only Nyaya. With this much of introduction to Indian Astika philosophy, I am proceeding to discuss Nyaya philosophy. Nyaya means argumentation, tarka, based on a system that is intellectual, analytic, logical, and epistemological. It is also called Tarka Shastra or science of reasoning, Pramana Shastra or science of logic and epistemology, Hettovada or science of causes, Vada Vidya or science of debate, and Anvikshiki, science of critical study. Gautama, also known as Akshapada, is founder of Nyaya school. He is Sutrakara. Gautama's Nyaya Sutra is the source of philosophy. Gautama belongs to 6th century BC. Nyaya Sutra contains, now we'll discuss the literature part of Nyaya Sutra. So, the first is Gautama's Nyaya Sutra, which was written somewhere in 5th or 6th century. There is dispute. Some people say it is 6th century, some say it is 5th century BC. Nyaya Sutra contains 5 volumes, 10 chapters, and 528 sutras. Nyaya Bhashya is a commentary by Vatsyayana on Nyaya Sutra. Udyutkara wrote his Vartika, which is commented upon by Vachaspati in his Tatparya Tika. Udayan's Nyaya Kusumanjali and Jayanta's Nyaya Manjari are the other important works of Nyaya school. Gangesa, with his book Tattva Chintamani, started Navya Nyaya or modern school of logic. Vasudeva, Raghunatha, Mathuranatha, Jagadisha, and Gadadhara are eminent logicians of this school. Udayan belongs to 11th century and Gangesa Upadhyaya belongs to 13th century. Both belong to Mithila. Some people say Gangesa belongs to Navadvip. Udayan forms the watershed between Gautama's Prachina Nyaya and Gangesa's Navya Nyaya. Nyaya is a system of atomistic pluralism and logical realism. It is allied to Vaisheshika. So, many teachers of philosophy, they classify Nyaya and Vaisheshika into one philosophy and call it Nyaya Vaisheshika. It is allied to Vaisheshika, and that is why it accepts many principles of Vaisheshika, and Vaisheshika also accepts many principles or doctrine from Nyaya. Nyaya has developed logic and epistemology, whereas Vaisheshika has developed metaphysics and ontology. That is the difference. Nyaya philosophy consists of 16 things for studying reality. 16 processes rather, methodology. 1. The object of true knowledge, prameya, must be known for liberation. It is called metaphysics. 2. Valid source of knowledge, pramana, says how to know how to know them and truly and correctly. How to know them truly and correctly. And that is called epistemology. Then the other processes are doubt, sansaya, aim, prayojana, example, drishtanta, doctrine, siddhanta, constituent of inference, avayava, logic, tarka, conclusion, nirnaya, argument to discover the truth, vada, to argue just to win, jalpa, destructive criticism, vitanda, apparent but not valid reason, hetva bhasa, unfair reply, chhala, false analogy, jati, and grounds of defeat, nigrahasthana. So, sansaya, prayojana, drishtanta, siddhanta, avayava, tarka, nirnaya, vada, jalpa, vitanda, hetva bhasa, chala, jati, and nigrahasthana. These things form the methodology of coming to reality, study reality. They apply all these processes to arrive at some conclusion. Nyaya recognizes 12 objects of knowledge: soul, suffering, freedom from suffering, body, 5 senses, object of senses, cognition, mind, activity, result, rebirth, mental defects, attachment and aversion. Under mental defect, it is attachment and aversion, etc. I am enlisting all these things because these terms will come when I will explain the content of Nyaya philosophy. Unless you are acquainted with them, it is difficult to understand. Actually, if time would have permitted me, I would have given examples and explained you all these terms. But with limited time, I have to cover the entire philosophy. So, I think you will feel dry just to listen a few words. Maybe you have come across these words and maybe you haven't. But you have to consider these words while studying Nyaya philosophy. It is dry, not interesting. If I would have told you some stories and given example, it would have been interesting. But the time doesn't permit. Therefore, I am proceeding. According to Nyaya philosophy, there are 4 valid sources of knowledge. I have told you already, valid sources of knowledge are 6 in case of all philosophies. But Nyaya accepts only 4 valid sources of knowledge. They are direct perception, pratyaksha, inference, anumana, comparison, upamana, testimony, sabda. Invalid source of knowledge are memory. They do not believe on memory. Somebody will say, I remember this, they will not believe. And doubt. If somebody states that I'm in doubt, maybe this is like this, maybe that is like that. It is not believed in philosophy. And erroneous perception, Brahma, hypothetical argument, arthapatti. These things are not accepted in Nyaya as the valid source of knowledge. Now, considering all these terms, after considering all these terms, let us proceed to the content of the philosophy. Actually, we have assembled to study this, but by the way, just to get acquainted you with certain terms, I have narrated all these earlier things. Now, perception, pratyaksha pramana. We have to analyze what is pratyaksha pramana. This is very important. Knowledge or cognition is defined as apprehension or consciousness. Nyaya, being realistic, believes that knowledge reveals both the subject and the object, which are quite distinct from itself. All knowledge is a revelation of manifestation of objects. Knowledge is produced in the soul when it comes into contact with the not soul. Correspondence with the object is the nature of truth. Valid knowledge corresponds to its object and leads to successful activity. Invalid knowledge doesn't correspond to its object and leads to failure and disappointment. Gautama defines perception as non-erroneous cognition, which is produced by the intercourse of sense organs with objects, which is not associated with a name and which is well defined. The self comes into contact with the manas with the sense organs, and the sense organs with the objects. The sense organs are derived from the elements whose specific qualities of smell, taste, color, touch, and sound are manifested by them. The manas is the mediator between the self and these sense organs. The NYAYA maintain two stages of perception. Those who adhere to Nyaya philosophy are called NYAYA. So the NYAYA maintain two stages of perception. Two stages of perception, note it. The first is called indeterminate or nirvikalpa, and the second is determinate or savikalpa. They are not two different kinds of perception, but only the earlier and the later stages in the same complex process of perception. Similar is the contribution of Kant to Western philosophy, who says knowledge involves both sensation and conception. Perception is a complex process of experience involving both sensation and conception. In indeterminate perception presents the bare object without any characterization, without any characteristic of the object. In determinate perception, we relate the subject with its attributes. The feeling of indeterminate perception is psychological, but its knowledge is logical. Hence, all our perception being a cognition is determinate and is perceptual judgment. Hence, though we feel indeterminate perception as a psychological state of sense experience, its knowledge, even as indeterminate perception, is result of logical deduction. Vatsayana says that if an object is perceived with its name, we have determinate perception. If it is perceived without its name, we have indeterminate perception. Gangesha Upadhyaya in Navya Nyaya says, he defines indeterminate perception as the non-relational apprehension of an object devoid of all association of name, genus, and differentia, etc. Perception again may be ordinary, laukika, and extraordinary, alaukika. Ordinary perception is of two kinds, internal and external, antar and bahya. In internal perception, mind comes into contact with psychical state and processes like cognition, affection, desire, pain, pleasure, aversion. External perception is of five kinds: visual, auditory, tactual, gustatory, and olfactory, brought about by the sense organs. Again, extraordinary perception is of three kinds: Samanya Lakshana, Jnana Lakshana, and Yogaja Lakshana. Samanya Lakshana, say for example, cow and cowness. Particular cow is ordinary, but universal cowness is extraordinary perception. Whenever we perceive a particular cow, we perceive the universal cowness inherent in it. They go together. We just don't perceive the cow itself. We simultaneously perceive cowness in it. Then Jnana Lakshana. Whenever we see a rose, we see the fragrance. We see the fragrance of rose. Ice looks cold. Ice looks cold. Stone looks hard. Tea looks hot. They look. As soon as I see tea, I can visualize it is hot. As soon as I see ice, I visualize it is cool. So this is called Jnana Lakshana because I have previous Jnana that ice is cold. Stone looks hard. Yogaja Lakshana. It is intuitive and immediate perception of all objects, past, present, and future, possessed by yogis through power of meditation and acquired siddhis. It is aparoksha anubhuti of Vedanta and kaivalya of Sankhya. It is intuitive, supra-sensuous, and supra-rational. These are the characteristics of different extraordinary perception. These three, Jnana Lakshana, Yoga Lakshana, and Samanya Lakshana. Now, we have finished the perception, direct perception part. Pratyaksha Pramana. Now we'll go to indirect inference. That is inference. Indirect Pramana. First comes inference, Anumana. This second kind of knowledge is inferential or rational or Anumana. It is defined as that cognition which presupposes some other cognition. You see, such beautiful things are given by Nyaya philosophy. And all other philosophies accept these things as their code also. It is defined as that cognition which presupposes some other cognition. It is mediate or indirect and arises through a mark, the middle term, that is hetu, which is invariably connected with the major term sadhya. It is mana, which arises after anu, meaning other knowledge. Anu means other knowledge. And it comes, inference comes after that. Invariable concomitance, vyapti, is the nerve of interference. Like Aristotelian syllogism, the Indian inference has three terms: the major sadhya, the minor paksha, the middle hetu. From presence of smoke in a hill, as qualified by knowledge, that whenever there is a smoke, there is a power, there is a fire. Qualified, you see, known before. From the presence of smoke in the hill, as qualified by knowledge, that whenever there is a smoke, there is a fire, we proceed to infer the presence of fire in the hill. This is inference. Hill is minor term, fire is major term, smoke is middle term. Indian logic doesn't separate deduction from induction. Inference is complex process involving both deduction and induction. The Aristotelian syllogism is only deductive, and formal with the Nyaya syllogism is deductive, inductive, deductive and inductive, and formal material. Inference, according to Nyaya, is neither from universal to particular, not from particular to universal, but from particular to particular through the universal. Let me repeat. Inference, according to Nyaya, is neither from universal to particular, nor from particular to universal, but from particular to particular through the universal. I'll give an example. According to NYAYA, let us say this hill has fire. It is called Pratigya because it has smoke. Hetu, Karan. Whatever has smoke has fire. This is Udaharana. This hill has smoke, which is invariably associated with fire. That is Upanaya. And last or final conclusion is this hill has fire. This is Indian system. Now let us come to Aristotelian syllogism. As I have mentioned earlier, all things which have smoke have fire. Major premise. This hill has smoke. Minor premise. Therefore, this hill has fire. It is conclusion in 3 steps. Now, after Anumana, the other source of knowledge is comparison, Upamana. The third kind of valid cognition is Upamiti, and it means Upamana. It is knowledge derived from comparison and roughly corresponds to analogy. It has been defined as knowledge of relation between a word and its denotation. This is very example because our literature and language, they have been enriched by these data from NYAYA. I'll go into detail at the end of this lecture. It is produced by knowledge of resemblance or similarity. For example, a man who has never seen a gavaya or wild cow and does not know what it is told by a person that a wild cow is an animal like cow. Subsequently, he comes across a wild cow in the forest, which he had not seen earlier, and recognizes it as the wild cow. Then this knowledge is due to Upamana, because he has already heard it, and he compared this animal with whatever he has heard earlier. It is produced by the knowledge of similarity. Hence, Upamana is just the knowledge of the relation between name and the object denoted by that name. Verbal testimony, Shabda, it is called Agama also. The fourth kind of valid knowledge is Shabda or Agama. Agama. Authoritative verbal testimony. It is testimony. Because from that only you can prove. It is defined as the statement of a trustworthy person, Apta Vakya, and consists in understanding its meaning. A sentence is defined as a collection of words, and a word is defined as that which is potent to convey its meaning. It is based on the words of trustworthy person, human or divine. Maybe human, maybe divine. Testimony of 2 kinds, Vaidika and Lokika. The Vaidika testimony is perfect and infallible, as the Veda are considered to be spoken by God. A sentence, in order to be intelligible, must conform to certain conditions. These conditions are 4: Akanksha, Yogavat, Sannidhi, and Tatparya. The words of a sentence are interrelated. The words of a sentence are interrelated and stand in need of one another in order to express a complete sense. The second condition is that the word should possess fitness to convey the sense and should not contradict the meaning. The third condition is the close proximity of the words to one another. There should not be gap. The fourth condition is the intention of the speaker if the words are ambiguous. It is intention of the speaker. NYAYA admits only these 4: perception, inference, comparison, testimony as pramana, that is means of knowledge. Other two are not accepted. Out of 6. Then let us go to the cause factor, because cause is always important. A cause is defined as an unconditional and invariable antecedent of an effect, and an effect is an unconditional, invariable consequent of a cause. This is a consequent and antecedent. These two are important. Antecedent is cause and consequent is the effect. Plurality of cause is ruled out. The first essential characteristic of cause is its antecedence, purva vritti. The second is its invariability. It must invariably precede the effect, niyata purva vritti. The third is its unconditionality, ananyatha siddhi. Western philosophy defines cause in the same term, not the same term, but the same as Nyaya. They have their own terms, but there is similarity between the consideration of cause. There are 3 kinds of causes: the material cause, samabhayi, or upadana karana. Upadana karana. Samabhayi is, we are not acquainted with that word, but material cause is called upadana karana. It is always a substance or dravya, as for example, thread in the cloth. The efficient cause nimitta karana. It is the power which helps the material cause to produce the effect. The weaver is the efficient cause of cloth. And third is the non-inherent cause, asamabhayi karana. It is inherent in the material cause and help production of the effect. The color of the thread is one such example, that is called tanturupa. It is the non-inherent cause of the color of the cloth. The non-inherent cause is quality or action or guna. Now, with this elementary consideration, let us go to the central points of philosophy. The central points of philosophy are, as I have told, soul or creation and God. Because most of these orthodox philosophy are spiritual in nature. They have their own consideration for soul, for explaining soul and creation and God. The Nyaya, like Vaisheshika, believes in teleological creation. The material cause of this universe are eternal atoms of earth, water, fire, and air. Efficient cause of creation is God. The infinite individual souls are co-eternal with atoms. And God is co-eternal with atoms and souls, and is external to both, but external to both. Nyaya advocates atomism, spiritualism, theism, realism, and pluralism. Creation means combination of atoms. Creation means, important, creation means combinations of atoms, and destruction means dissolution of this combination through the motion supplied to or withdrawn from atoms by unseen power working under the guidance of God. This sentence is very important. You see, he has dealt with 4 things: atoms, souls, some unseen power or drashta, and God. And he has differentiated between them. This one sentence differentiates between them. How? That I will explain. The innumerable eternal atoms and innumerable eternal souls are both beyond creation and destruction. See, we have read destruction and creation, and he says that they are beyond destruction and creation. Innumerable atoms and innumerable eternal source are both beyond creation and destruction because they are eternal. Because they are eternal, they are beyond creation and destruction. God can neither create them nor destroy them. The individual soul is regarded as the substratum of the quality of consciousness, which is not its essence, but an accidental property. Consciousness is not essence as per NYAYA. That is how it differs. We are not acquainted with this idea. Consciousness, which is not its essence, but an accidental property of soul and atoms. The soul is real knower, real enjoyer, and real active agent. It is not transcendental consciousness, and it is different from God, who is the supreme soul. Those who are acquainted with, most of us, Vedanta, it is a different statement. Cognition, affection, and cognitions are the attributes of soul, which is partless and all-pervading. Each soul has its manas during the empirical life and is separated from it in liberation. It is distinct from the body, the senses, and the mind. Bondage is due to ignorance and karma. Both the things. Bondage is due to ignorance and karma. Liberation is due to knowledge and destruction of karma. The Vedas are work of God and therefore claim absolute authority. That is how they define soul and creation. So the core of philosophy remains like we have not covered yet God and the conclusion part. NYAYA accepts the metaphysics of Vaisheshika school and the accounts of matter, soul, and God. Think. NYAYA accepts the metaphysics of Vaisheshika school and the accounts of matter, soul, and God. They are almost same as these in the Vaisheshika. Udayan's argument, Udayan is from NYAYA school. Udayan's argument for the existence of God have become a classical for theism. All theists, they accept these norms. He has defined a few norms. The world is an effect, and hence it must have an efficient cause. This intelligent agent is God, Karjat. This is called Karjat. So, God is Karjat. The atoms, being essentially inactive, cannot form the different combinations unless God gives them motion. That is called Ayojanat. The atom being essentially inactive, essentially they are inactive. They cannot move. And the motion is given by God. The third is, the world is sustained by God's will. Dhrittade. A word has meaning and signifies an object. The power of words to signify their object comes from God. Pada. God is the author of infallible Veda. Pratyayataha. The Veda testifies the existence of God. Shrutehe. The Vedic commands are divine commands. God is the creator and the promulgator of moral laws. Bhakyat. At the time of creation, the soul, atoms, unseen power, space, time, mind are all unconscious. So God must exist as consciousness. We reap the fruits of our own action. Merits and demerits accrue from our actions. And stock of merit and demerit is called adrashta, the unseen power. But this unseen power, being unintelligent, needs the guidance of a supremely intelligent God. So this is how God is defined. And all atheists, they accept these norms. Now the chief value of Nyaya lies in its epistemology, logic, and methodology, which have influenced all schools of Indian philosophy. But its ontology of atomism, pluralism, realism, theism, and spiritualism huddled together into one mass. That is the one defect pointed out by students of philosophy or teachers of philosophy. The logic of pluralistic realism is a common sense view of the world. Going back to God again, the Sutra 1921 of chapter 4, section 1 in the Nyaya Sutra are the only textual passages which allude to God as the creator of the world. The first sutra, which speaks of the inadequacy of individuals' karma as the causal principle, makes God the creator of the world. The third sutra in the present context is interpreted by Vatsayana as establishing the necessary God's agency. Vatsayana has written commentary on Nyaya Sutra. The actions or karmas of men are not the self-sufficient cause of the world. And so, for the creation of the world, we must postulate the agency of God. The actions of men are by themselves incapable of producing their fruits. But these are indirectly made fruitful by agency of God. Actions alone do not give us fruits, but they are indirectly fructified by God. Vatsayana holds that God is capable of exacting the world by a mere fiat of the world. God creates by a mere fiat of the world. He is the shelter of all creatures and protects all beings like an affectionate father. He is possessed by eternal knowledge of all things. Then the question arises now, why should there be a will to creation at all? A God with an unsatisfied want would be contradiction. A God cannot be with a God cannot have wants. It has been maintained that God engages in creative activity in a sportive mode, not with any fulfillment. It may be interesting to observe in the connection that Gaudapada too, in his Mandukya Karika, Gaudapada is Guru's Guru of Sankaracharya, and he has written Karika on Mandukya Upanishad, has summed up these views in a couplet and drawn the same conclusion with Vidyutkara, that it is essential nature of God to engage in creative activities, as no motive can be alleged with reference to one who has no unsatisfied want. Man's relation to God is not clearly emphasized in the ancient literature. It is only in the works of Udayan that we find that the worship of God is instrumental in the achievement of salvation and also enjoyment of heavenly bliss, whichever may be sought after by the devotees. Now we shall discuss a bit on Navya Nyaya, and I'll conclude with these a few sentences on Navya Nyaya, because Nyaya has been classified into two, Prachina Nyaya and Navya Nyaya. So let me speak. Of course, there is not much difference, but actually during last 18 centuries, 18 centuries, this literature has developed and they have evolved. And in the process of evolution, they have broadened their view. And that is why from Udayan till Gangesha, it started Navya Nyaya. Udayan is the pioneer of Navya Nyaya school, which has reached its culmination in the Tattva Chintamani of Gangesha. Gangesha's Tattva Chintamani is work on epistemology and logic, but Gangesha does discuss many metaphysical questions which have a bearing upon the theory of knowledge. He is a methodologist. His logic is not metaphysics. An epoch-making evolution of language is due to the modern logicians. Almost all the branches of Sanskrit literature, for example, philosophy, grammar, law, rhetoric, etc., are indebted to Navya Nyaya for the expression of their subtle thoughts. The study of Navya Nyaya has become as essential as that of Sanskrit grammar. The study of Navya Nyaya helps to sharpen our intellect and promote a better understanding of problems and their solution. It awakens keen insight and develops the critical faculty. The modern logicians lay the greatest stress on free thinking and recognizes the preeminent value of direct observation and reasoning. In the Navya Nyaya system of thought, there are no watertight compartments for epistemology, logic, psychology, ethics, theology, metaphysics, etc. It is naturally expected that these different sciences would be harmoniously blended together into an integral system of thought. The goal of ethics is self-realization. If one sincerely and constantly practices meditation upon the self, then the virtue arising out of such meditation will surely lead one to the direct intuition of soul as substratum of everything. This mystic vision of the soul as substratum will surely dispel basic ignorance and lead on to the final emancipation. Gadadhara suggests that divine grace cannot, in fact, lead to the final emancipation. Divine grace cannot lead. Self-realization is its necessary condition. Therefore, God is not integral part of Navya Nyaya. Thank you all. I have concluded with this sentence. God is not essential part of Navya Nyaya.
Thanks a lot, Brother Dhruba. We open up for discussions. And I'd just like to add a few observations. One thing is that 6th century BC, Gautama Buddha was also alive and was born. And the fact that he also talked about understanding all this with people's mind, using their minds and understanding the philosophy, not just accepting things blindly. And of course, the basic work of the mind is logical thinking. And you say that Aristotle also, 4th century BC. And now what I'm thinking is we live in the computer age, which is an age of logic in a way, because computers, there's nothing possible without logical thinking. So maybe all those souls from Greece and from India have reborn and they've come back with their high logical thinking. And I think what is more wonderful for me to understand is such great logicians and thinkers were there in our country, and which got the unfortunate reputation of being a superstitious and backward country. It is so sad to even so many of us as youngsters don't even know that such great literature was there. And I wish we know about the Yoga Sutra, but most of the normal public will not know this knowledge, this Nyaya Shastra knowledge. So thank you so much for bringing this. And yes, please, we are open for comments and conversation.
Thank you, sister. Thank you, sister, for supplementing it.
Mr. Raman, you can.
Yeah. It was an excellent presentation on Nyaya Prasthana, which is the standpoint of reason. Nyaya Prasthana, along with the Vedas and Upanishads, which goes as Shruti Prasthana, and also Bhagavad Gita, which is a remembered tradition, which is Smriti Prasthana. And he had dealt in detail about Nyaya Prasthana, touching on all the valid aspects. And Nyaya Prasthana is nothing but the Brahma Sutras, which philosophically string together all the central concepts of the Upanishad. So I thank Mr. Panda for his excellent presentation, wherein he had confined himself only to the Nyaya Prasthana and has elaborated it in detail. And
thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Raman. I think that brought even more clarity for this presentation. Mr. Shinde, Dr. Shinde, are you there? Would you like to say something?
I have joined late just now. Actually, I had a meeting, just finished, and just I want to see Panda. Very nice as you explained. And I also heard Raman. Nyaya Shastra is essential to study, and it is nice Brother Panda has dealt with. Thank you very much. I have not heard much, so sorry, I can't say anything about it, but I appreciate his way of explanation. Thank you.
So, which book would you recommend, sir? Dhruvji, which book would you recommend beginners to read about Nyaya Shastra?
Nyaya Shastra, there are so many books, but I have consulted 4 books, a critical study. Just a minute, I had it here, but I'm just 1 minute. If you give me 1 minute, I will tell you. 2 to 3 books. Yes, a critical survey of Indian philosophy by Chandradhar Sharma.
Thank you.
And I have gone through a few sutras of Nyaya Sutra with its commentary. And I have got another volume on Indian philosophy, which is compiled by this, just a minute, if you excuse me, the Cultural Heritage of India. They have compiled on Indian philosophy a large volume where Nyaya Sutra is dealt with.
Okay, sir.
There is a publication from the Cultural Heritage of India and volume 3 on philosophies. It is published by Ramakrishna Mission, Institute of Culture. Then a few small booklets by our Chinmaya Mission and Ramakrishna Mission. Thank you.
How is Chanakya Nyaya Shastra?
Chanakya Nyaya Shastra may be considered, but as philosophy, it is not a text. From philosophy point of view, it is not a text. One can consider its different points.
Okay.
Sir, you have given a lot of information, but some things got stuck to my mind. Like you had mentioned among the 16 types of things in Nyaya Shastra, metaphysics, doubt, etc., etc. Some of them are actually negative. Like when you are arguing from a negative viewpoint.
Yes.
That was very wonderful, sir. Usko ek baar aur bataiye.
Jarur. That is doubt, sansaya, prayojana, aims, examples, drishtanta, siddhanta, tarka. And the points you refer to is Bada, argument to discover the truth. It starts with the 10th one, and it goes like to argue just to win, jalpa, just to win. Not rational argument, but arguments just to win. That is called jalpa. And destructive criticism, that is called vitanda. And apparent but not valid reason is hetva bhasa. An unfair reply, chhala.
Sir, I think
and falsigoni jati. These are the negative way of arguing.
Mahapatra ji must be using all this for his business, for his work.
No, my request is, Brother Panda, if time permits, if you can write an article, and so that we can publish it in Indian Theosophist. Series of article.
From the points I can elaborate. I can elaborate these points.
You can, because Sundaramji also interested by giving quotation from different texts relating to this NYAYA DARSHAN. So it will be helpful. And as we are now publishing a Hindi edition of the Indian Theosophist, so it will circulate throughout India, English as well as Hindi. So kindly, at your free time, just write down the article. So it will be helpful to each and everyone.
Yes, sir. It is possible. It is possible because I have noted the points and I will elaborate.
Yes. I noted point and you explain it more so that it will be helpful to all.
Yeah.
Yes, Bimalji, what is your further advice?
No, sir. Thank you so much. It was wonderful. Actually, Theosophy opens your mind to so many different philosophies and books, because everyone is doing different studies, and so I think it's a beautiful system, our system of spreading Theosophy and relearning it.
Yes, sister. Very rightly you have pointed out. Actually, this lecture I prepared is not that elaborate. It takes 2 to 3 classes if I take in detail Nyaya. But then I wanted to arise interest in people, those who hear it, to go for further study and further reading. That is my intention.
That should be the aim, so that participant, they can go for further study or research. Yes.
And in that article, sir, I will give reference of a few books.
Yes.
Actually, I have not prepared that. I have gone through some 6 books for this lecture. Okay. So I will give a list of those 6 books.
Right.
As bibliography.
Yes. Any question from any side, Vimal, you can ask. If we don't have any question, then we will close the session.
May I request Mitalini sister to say the closing prayer, and kindly all of you please sit in meditation for a minute. Mitalini sister, Mitalini.
Namaste to all. Asato ma satkamaya, tamasu ma jyotirkamaya, mrityurma amrutangamaya. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani paschyantu, ma kaschit dukhabhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Brother Panda. Very nice.
Thank you, sir.
Gautam Nyaya Shastra, Gautam Rishi Nyaya Shastra is famous.
Yes, Nyaya Sutra.
Nyaya
It is called
Sutra.
Nyaya Sutra. Yeah. That is the foundation book.
Yeah.
Foundation book of.
Very
Yeah.
good. Nice, you are taking to us to the foundation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is there any link between Gautam Buddha, Gautam Rishi, or the
No.
two separate entities?
No, this Gautam, I have read a few books where they have mentioned it. Gautama Rishi is different than this Gautama.
Yeah.
And Gautam Buddha is of course different.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Bimalji.
Thank you. Namaskar to all.
Namaste.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Each and everyone.
Pradeep, I had a meeting with Linda. So just now finished and then I came here.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Okay, thank you. But I want to listen actually.